Conference.
The party yesterday said it had suspended its MP Rupert Low and referred him to the police. Reform alleged Low had made threats of physical violence against the party chairman. For a party riding high on its polling figures, such a schism as this at the very top presents a deeply uncomfortable moment. The party said it had also appointed a lawyer to investigate complaints about serious bullying from two women who worked in Mr. Low's offices. Low, the MP for Great Yarmouth, hit back, denying the allegations and claimed he was being knifed in the...
What happens when a political party built entirely around one man's personality suddenly faces internal rebellion? That's the question haunting Reform UK as Rupert Low's firing sends shockwaves through British politics. Starmer's ruthless mockery of Farage isn't just parliamentary theatre. It's a strategic dismantling of Reform's credibility at their most vulnerable moment.
Well, the party has released a statement saying evidence was provided to us of workplace bullying, the targeting of female staff who raised concerns. The MP says the claims are untrue and said there is zero credible evidence and evidence of derogatory and discriminatory remarks made about women, including reference to a perceived disability. We feel we have a duty of care to all our staff, whether employed directly or indirectly.
The Labour leader has identified the perfect pressure point, exploiting tensions that have been brewing beneath Reform's surface since its inception. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. Reform UK is crumbling from within, and it couldn't be happening at a worse time for Nigel Farage. The party that positioned itself as the voice of the forgotten working class.
The threats were made on Friday the 13th of December. They say officers are carrying out an assessment of the allegations to determine what further action may be required. Yes, this is developing hour by hour, and we just have had confirmation from the Metropolitan Police. What they say is that on Thursday, the 6th of March, they received an allegation of verbal threats made by a 67-year-old man. So this is a complaint that has been made to the police just this week based on alleged threats made on the 13th of December. So
is now showing all the signs of an authoritarian structure that can't tolerate internal criticism. At the centre of this spectacular implosion is Rupert Low, once heralded as Reform's authentic working class champion, and now unceremoniously expelled after daring to question the great leader. Low didn't mince words when he took aim at Farage, accusing him of harbouring a messiah complex and reducing Reform to little more than a protest party. But what's truly revealing is the suspicious timing of his removal. Within just 24 hours of voicing these criticisms, Low found himself not only fired, but reported to police over alleged threats against the party chairman. Coincidence? It seems increasingly unlikely. The official line from Reform UK claims that Low had the whip withdrawn after complaints were raised by Reform's chairman.
I'm just disappointed because, I really think that the country needs reform, and I want them just to keep it together because obviously I think, all the other parties like Conservative Labour, they're just...
Events surrounding their MP hadn't gone unnoticed.
He's lost the whip, apparently, but I'm sure they'll rally round and carry on. That happens with every party.
Regarding threats of violence. But Low has fired back, calling the party's actions precipitous and questioning why no proper investigation took place before such serious allegations were made public. This has all the hallmarks of a panicked response to silenced dissent rather than a legitimate disciplinary action. What Reform UK doesn't seem to understand is that Low's appeal was precisely what the party needed. A straightforward, no-nonsense communicator who connected with working-class voters. His unpolished authenticity was a precious commodity in a political landscape dominated by career politicians. These are exactly the voters Reform cannot afford to alienate if they hope to maintain their recent momentum. Even more damaging are Low's revelations about Reform's internal structure. He's not the first to point out the party's lack of democratic processes. Former members have repeatedly highlighted how the organisation functions more as Farage's personal project than a democratic political party. There are no meaningful internal elections, little policy consultation with members, and an inner circle that seems to operate entirely at Farage's discretion. With Reform's facade of democracy crumbling under the weight of its internal contradictions, Keir Starmer has spotted the perfect moment to strike. The Labour leader's recent mockery of Farage isn't random political theatre. It's the opening move in a carefully orchestrated campaign that could permanently sever Reform's connection to its working-class base. You want to know what Farage and Reform are doing on their rare visits to Parliament? They're voting against our employment rights bill. Starmer's calculated jab cuts straight to the heart of Reform's vulnerability. By highlighting the glaring contradiction between Reform's populist rhetoric and their actual voting record, Starmer is executing a precision strike against Reform's credibility at the exact moment when the party is most exposed. This isn't mere opportunism, it's strategic brilliance. While Reform scrambles to contain the fallout from their leadership crisis, Labour is methodically positioning itself as the stable alternative in a political landscape marked by chaos. The contrast couldn't be more stark: a disciplined Labour Party with clear policy positions versus a Reform operation that appears to be unravelling before voters' eyes. What makes Starmer's approach particularly effective is his laser focus on employment rights. He's identified Reform's Achilles heel, the disconnect between their working-class support base and their actual parliamentary voting record. By emphasising how Reform MPs vote against the very protections their supporters rely on, Starmer is driving a wedge between Farage and the disillusioned voters who are drawn to his populist message. This represents a significant shift in Labour's approach to populist challenges. Rather than dismissing Reform or attempting to outflank them with their own brand of populism, Starmer is systematically exposing the fundamental contradictions at the heart of Farage's project. It's a more sophisticated strategy that aims not just to win back voters in the short term, but to permanently damage Reform's credibility. The timing couldn't be more devastating for Reform. Polling data suggests their recent surge in popularity is already showing signs of stalling as the fallout from their internal crisis deepens. Voters who were attracted to Reform as an alternative to establishment politics are now questioning whether a party that can't maintain order in its own ranks can credibly present itself as fit to govern. And so we find ourselves at a critical crossroads for Reform UK, caught in the all-too-familiar trap that ensnares personality-driven political movements. History teaches us that parties built around charismatic figures inevitably face this moment of truth. What we're witnessing isn't just Reform's internal squabble, but rather the predictable outcome, when democratic principles take a backseat to personal ambition. The accusations of a messiah complex directed at Farage reveal something deeper about populist movements in general. They often begin with genuine grievance, but transform into vehicles for individual advancement rather than collective progress. As Starmer continues his methodical dismantling of Reform's credibility, the party faces a stark choice that will determine its very survival. Reform must either evolve into a genuinely democratic movement with robust internal processes and collective decision-making, or it will become another footnote in political history, just another populist flash that failed to institutionalise its appeal beyond its founder's personality. For voters seduced by charismatic figures promising easy solutions to complex problems, Reform's current predicament should serve as a sobering reminder that lasting political change requires structures, not just personalities.